Welcome to today's very special webinar as we kick off GLR Week 2020. We'll start in just one moment. Great, welcome everybody. I'm Yoli Flores, Chief Learning Officer for the Campaign for Grade Level Reading. Thank you all for joining us for this special conversation with Carey Wright, Dr. Carey Wright, Maintaining Momentum in Mississippi. I'll get us started with just a few housekeeping details. First, we'd like you to introduce yourself. So please use the chat box at the bottom of the screen to share your name, city or state, and your organization. Be sure to select panelists and attendees, or everybody, so that we know all who is here. All attendees are in listen-only mode, but we encourage your engagement by posting questions in the Q&A box. We will spend the last 20 minutes or so responding to the questions that you post. This webinar is being recorded, and a link to the recording will be emailed next week to all who registered. A link to the slides will appear in the chat box, so if you want to take a peek at them while we're going through them, or later you have them with you. And finally, we will be posting a brief on-screen evaluation during the Q&A. We highly encourage you to respond. It helps us with our commitment to continuous improvement. So before we begin, let me share a bit about GLR Week 2020, which launched this week. GLR Week is the campaign's biannual convening, which brings together the states and communities in the GLR network, our philanthropic partners, and our funders. What's unique about GLR Week, besides this year that it's all virtual, is that this year GLR Week has been transformed into a series of events and activities featuring the work and priorities of 24 states and communities in the GLR network. You can see on this map all of the activities going on around the country. The campaign is also sponsoring 5 online events, which you will see on the screen in just a moment. Together, we're lifting up early school success, mobilizing efforts to slow, stop, and reverse learning loss, and embracing parents as essential partners. We welcome you to join any of these state or GLR sponsored events, which will run through Friday. To register, you can click any of the links that Sierra will be putting in the chat box. The highlighted event, Friday at 2 o'clock, on ensuring equity as we address COVID learning loss, is sponsored by our partners at McKinsey & Company, and we'll have a unique registration link for you in the chat box for that event as well. And just very briefly, I want to call your attention to the upcoming GLR Learning Tuesday webinars through the end of July. As always, our webinars are on Tuesdays at 3 Eastern. And if you're joining us today, you'll receive information on each of these learning events, and we hope you will join us. The final slide has events for funders. So if you're interested in any of the events for the funder to funder conversations, we'll invite you to join as well, and those will also be in the chat box for registration. All right, with all those details out of the way, let's get started. It's quite special and truly an honor to have as part of GLR Week one of our nation's most respected and nationally recognized education leaders, Dr. Carey Wright, who will share the story and journey of Mississippi, including the remarkable progress on 4th grade reading in just 6 short years, and plans for maintaining this momentum in the face of the global pandemic. Today's conversation with Dr. Wright and several notable commentators will be moderated by our colleague and former GLR state lead in Mississippi, Dr. Angela Rutherford. Dr. Rutherford has more than 25 years of experience in public education. For the last 15 years, she has served as a professor at the University of Mississippi. During this time, she has held the position of Director of the Center for Excellence in Literacy Instruction and managed multiple grant projects focused on providing technical assistance and professional development. She has consulted and advised states, districts, and schools in the implementation of evidence-based literacy programs, including the implementation of successful literacy programs for disadvantaged students in low-performing, high needs, and rural schools and districts. Dr. Rutherford is a nationally certified trainer of language essentials for teachers of reading and spelling, or letters, and has presented modules since 2010. In addition, she's actively served on national, regional, state, and local committees, focusing on ensuring that students receive equitable access to effective reading instruction. So welcome, Dr. Rutherford. I hand this over to you.
Thank you so much, Yoli, and thanks to all of you joining in the kickoff event for Grade Level Reading Week. I'm honored to serve as the moderator for this conversation, but most importantly, I'm honored to play a small part in sharing about the great work happening in Mississippi. As a native Mississippian and a product of Mississippi Public Schools, it is with great pride that I serve in this capacity. You know, Mississippi no longer sits dead last in NAEP reading achievement. And while that's laudable and something to celebrate, ultimately we're celebrating that Mississippi students have much brighter futures because of this work. We have a special guest whom I'll officially introduce in a few moments. The governor of the great state of Mississippi, Governor Tate Reeves, will join the webinar in a few moments to provide a few remarks and to introduce Dr. Carey Wright, our state superintendent of education. Before Governor Reeves joins, I have the pleasure of introducing our three distinguished commentators. I'm thankful for each of them and the role each has played in Mississippi's story. First, we have Dr. Kymyona Burk, currently serving as the Policy Director for Early Literacy at the Foundation for Excellence in Education, or Excel in Ed. In this role, Dr. Burk supports states pursuing a comprehensive approach to K-3 reading policy, with a heavy focus on supporting successful policy implementation. She most recently served as the Executive Director of Teaching and Learning in the Jackson Public School District, and prior to that, served as the K-12 State Literacy Director for the Mississippi Department of Education. In that role, she led the state-level implementation of the Literacy-Based Promotion Act, passed in 2013, which aims to ensure that all students are proficient readers by 3rd grade. Dr. Burk received a doctorate in early education, a specialist in secondary education, a Master of Science in Educational Leadership, a Master of Arts in Teaching with an emphasis in English, and a Bachelor of Arts in Political Science from Jackson State University. Thank you, Kymyona, for being with us today, and we look forward to your comments. Our second commentator is Kelly Butler. Kelly serves as the CEO of the Barksdale Reading Institute in the state of Mississippi and serves as a liaison to the state and to national literacy-related projects linked to the Institute. Kelly has authored 2 statewide studies on teacher preparation for early literacy instruction and is organizing a related multi-state initiative focused on teacher preparation and licensure. She holds a master's degree in administration, planning, and social policy from Harvard University. She served as a teacher in the Greenwich, Connecticut public schools and has worked extensively with a variety of nonprofit organizations in the areas of program development, technical support, and evaluation. Kelly is a member of the Mississippi Reading Panel, the Higher Education Literacy Council, and serves by appointment to the Southeast Region's Educational Laboratory Advisory Board. Thank you, Kelly, and we look forward to hearing from you as well. Our third commentator is Gray Tollison. Gray Tollison is a resident of Oxford, Mississippi, and is a graduate of Rhodes College and the Ole Miss Law School. He is a partner with the Tollison Law Firm here in Oxford, Mississippi, and most notably, he served 24 years in the Mississippi Senate, where he held several leadership positions, including President Pro Tem and Chairman of the Rules Committee. He also served his entire Senate tenure on the Senate Education Committee, and from 2012 to 2020, he served as chair of that committee. In that role as education chair, Gray led efforts to achieve significant education reform in Mississippi, a state, as we all know, that has struggled to raise student achievement. He worked for increased teacher pay, for passage of our third grade literacy promotion act, for an improved accountability A through F grading system, and for the expansion of our nationally board certified teacher program. Also, under his leadership, and after years of trying, the legislature abolished elected school superintendents and approved state-supported early education funding. In 2018, Gray Tollison was selected to the Council of Champions by the Campaign for Grade Level Reading. Thank you, Senator Tollison, and we're fortunate that you're with us today as well. At this time, I am pleased and honored to introduce the Governor of Mississippi, who has taken time out of what I'm sure is a tremendously busy schedule to join us today. As the 65th Governor of Mississippi, Tate Reeves is a conservative leader who is focused on the principles of guarding taxpayers' dollars, improving educational opportunity, and growing new careers so that the state's best and brightest can stay and raise their families at home in Mississippi. Governor Reeves served first as state treasurer and lieutenant governor, applying his financial training in the investments business to be the state's foremost advocate for balancing the state budget while minimizing state debt. He successfully passed the largest tax cut in Mississippi's history to encourage more private investment and job growth. Governor Reeves is a Rankin County, Mississippi native and a graduate of Florence High School. He's an honors graduate of Millsaps College and holds a bachelor's degree in economics. He and his wife, Ely, are the proud parents of 3 daughters, Tyler, Emma, and Madeline. The Reeves family attends Galloway United Methodist Church, and we are very honored to have you here with us, Governor Reeves. Thank you for your commitment to students, and thank you again for joining us today.
Thank you, Dr. Rutherford, and thanks to everyone for giving me the opportunity to be here today. I do want to particularly thank Kelly and Dr. Burk and Senator Tollison for being on this call today as well. We have worked very closely with so many people throughout the state to really lead to significant improved achievement levels for Mississippians, and it's going to be something that, as we continue to see these young people prosper, it's going to ultimately lead to a growing economy in our state. And so to all of you that are joining, I sincerely appreciate it. And Senator Tollison, it's always good to see you, and look forward to calling you something new here pretty soon. My role here today is actually to introduce someone who needs no introduction, someone with whom certainly Senator Tollison and I worked very, very closely since her appointment as the State Superintendent of Education in Mississippi in 2013. One of the things that we have found, and I think all of you will appreciate, is school superintendents, particularly state superintendents, don't typically have a tenure that lasts 7 months, much less one that lasts over 7 years. And I'd like to think that our very strong support of Dr. Wright and her leadership team has led her to be willing to stay in Mississippi and really implement the policies that we all have agreed to that are making a difference in children's lives. And I'll tell you, when I was out and about in the state last year and hearing from folks, you know, it doesn't leave me that not long before the November election last year, Mississippi was rated #1 in the nation on improvement in kids' performance on NAEP testing. 10-year numbers, and I will tell you, I immediately called Dr. Wright and said, okay, we've improved better than anyone else in the nation for the last 10 years. Now we just need to do it for 10 more years. And we won't only have to brag about our relative performance, we can then start bragging about our absolute performance of our student achievement. And that's really what it's all about. But none of that would have been possible without Dr. Wright and her leadership team. When I think about the progress that we've made here, it's something that we can all be proud of, but we can't rest on our laurels. And it's why I'm so glad that I have the opportunity to call Dr. Wright my friend. The Literacy Promotion Act has made a real difference in students' lives. And so I want to thank her for everything that she's done. I know she's going to tell you all of the successes, but I just want to quickly run through her bio for those of you who do not know her and let you know, having served as Lieutenant Governor for the last 8 years and now for 6 months as Governor, we couldn't have someone that's working harder for the students of Mississippi. The education reforms that have increased literacy skills in pre-K through grade 3, help push student achievement on the NAEP testing results to improve at a faster rate than virtually any other state. And we've increased our graduation rates in Mississippi from 72.5% 8 years ago to an all-time high of 85% under Dr. Wright's leadership. She has spearheaded initiatives that have nearly doubled our advanced placement participation and our success rate, resulted in significant annual gains in English language arts and mathematics proficiency, and earned Mississippi annual recognition from the National Institute for Early Education Research as one of only 7 states that meet the majority of quality standards for early childhood education. Dr. Wright was appointed in 2019 by our United States Secretary of Education to the National Assessment Governing Board. She's a board member and past president of the Board of Directors of the Council of Chief State School Officers, a Chiefs for Change board member, and an alumnus of the Broad Academy. Dr. Wright serves on the Reagan Institute Summit on Education Steering Committee and on Stanford University's Hoover Educational Success Initiative Practitioners Council. So I think it goes without saying that we in Mississippi are very fortunate to have her leadership at the State Department, and I look forward over the next many years to continue to work with her to grow student achievement in the great state of Mississippi. Dr. Wright, thank you so much for all you're doing on behalf of the 3 million Mississippians.
Thank you, Governor. I appreciate your comments. Thank you so much.
Again, thank you, Governor Reeves, for taking time. I know you have a press conference, so we appreciate your willingness to join us. Dr. Wright, wow, those are some stats that being from Mississippi, never thought I would hear. So I would love for you to start with the story of Mississippi, your aspirations for the children of Mississippi, and then your thoughts about this journey you've been on, helping Mississippi move from 39th to 2nd in the nation on 4th grade reading, and mind you, in just 6 short years.
Well, thank you, Angela. And if I could have my next slide. I start every single presentation with our focus on our vision and mission, because I'm a firm believer that if you don't know where you're headed, you're never going to get there. And this whole idea of creating a world-class educational system for our children so that they can be successful regardless of what they do in life is very, very critical to me and the work of the department. Next slide. We have devised 6 goals that we are focusing on. Nope, back up. One more, back up, one more. There you go. Oops. There you go. Love technology. These are the 6 goals that we work on each and every day at the department. And we have these as our focus even on our board meetings. So we have really put everything, the main thing is the main thing in our board meetings, and it is in the work of the department. We need to ensure that all children are showing proficiency and growth. We need to make sure children are graduating from high school, college, and career ready. We need to make sure our little ones are having access to a high quality early childhood program, and every school having effective teachers and leaders. We need to be using data on a regular basis, whether it's a community or whether it's a school or a teacher, to guide the decisions that we make. And we trying our very best to make sure that every school and district is rated C or higher in our state. Next slide. So let me give you a little bit about the background in Mississippi. Next slide. So when I arrived in 2013, here were the stats that we were looking at. We had the highest poverty rate in the nation. We still do, to be honest. We were rated F in K-12 achievement and a D for chance of success and quality counts. We ranked dead last in the nation for education. We had a 75.5% graduation rate, which was the second lowest among our neighboring states. And our fourth graders were reading more than one full grade level behind the national average on NAEP. And overall, we had the lowest NAEP scores in the nation. And this last bullet is really kind of important because we call this the honesty gap, because we had on our old standards and our old assessments, we were telling parents in the community that our children, we had 65 to 70% of our children in the community that were proficient in reading, and that was not the case. NAEP would come out, and then when I was here that first year, NAEP came out and said, no, you're at 22% proficiency. So we've worked very hard to clear up that honesty gap. And the other thing that I found was a culture of very low expectations for educational achievement, and that really was holding us back as well. Next slide. So what do? Well, we reorganized the State Department for sure, because we had to organize it around our strategic plan and the goals of our strategic plan. To be honest, we were just getting ready to pass the Literacy-Based Promotion Act and the Early Learning Collaborative Act, and we didn't even have a Department of Early Childhood or a Department of Literacy. So we really had to rearrange all of that and bring on some good people. We redid our standards. These are the most rigorous standards that we've ever had. Our old standards were rated worst in the nation by people that had evaluated them. And we also wanted to make sure when we developed our new standards, we also developed a new assessment. And the one thing I was ensuring for our teachers is that, number one, the assessment had to be aligned to our standards, and it also had to be aligned to NAEP and the rigor of NAEP, because we wanted to make sure that we were going to be as competitive as everyone else. We implemented a very strong accountability system. I thank Senator Tollison for his leadership with that, and I'm sure he's probably going to address that. We also improved data quality and transparency because we weren't where we needed to be with making sure that people knew our story and knew our facts. And we really, really doubled down on building the capacity of our teachers and leaders through professional development. And I can tell you that that was a real key for us in what we changed, because I'm a firm believer that every teacher, every leader comes in wanting to do the very best they can, but sometimes they need their capacity built in order to do it even better. And last but not least, I want to say I hired probably the world's best leadership team. I've got to tell you that. You cannot do this work alone, and you've got to have strong leadership around you. And this leadership team at the listen to me, back to Maryland, Mississippi Department of Ed, we had MDE as well, is undoubtedly the best leadership team I think I've ever had. So let's talk quickly about our achievement. So let's go through this slide by slide. I want you to know this is a really important one for us. You need to know that when the Early Learning Collaborative Act was passed in 2013, that was the first time Mississippi had put any money into public pre-K. And so we've been very proud of our collaboratives. That's what we call them. And now you can see on the screen, we've got 77% of our little ones are meeting kindergarten readiness coming into kindergarten. And that was compared to 59% in 2015. And actually those children that are in our collaboratives are really showing higher rates of kindergarten readiness than others that are coming into our kindergarten. Next slide. So what we found when we started really giving the kindergarten readiness assessment, I think it was a bit of a wake-up call for everybody, because we also found that only 1 in 3 of our children were coming in ready for kindergarten. And that's a little alarming, because that's a huge lift for our kindergarten teachers. And so what we can also say though, but now with what we've done and what we've put in place in kindergarten and pre-K, almost 66% of our kids are meeting the end of year score as a target score. Next slide. So the Literacy-Based Promotion Act, and this is under Senator Tollison's leadership, I really want to commend him for this. It originally required 3rd graders just to score at a level 2 in order to be promoted to 4th grade. We've got a 5-level system. 1 is the lowest, 5 is advanced, 4 is proficient. And so when the law was first passed, all they had to do was get above 1. And I went back across the street and asked the legislature, and Senator Tollison was kind enough to lead this effort there to raise the bar. I said, if we're going to get closer to proficiency, then we need to raise the bar. And we gave the districts 3 years notice, but now children are expected to score at 3 or higher, still not at proficient, but we're getting there in order to be promoted to the next grade. And the beauty of it was, I think everybody was expecting a major failure rate, but even when expectations were raised in 2019, 85.6% of our children met the highest reading standard ever. And that was hats off to our teachers, because that's letting us know they're doing exactly what we want them to do in teaching children to read. Next slide. Here are our statewide assessments. You are looking at the combinations of proficient and advanced, and you can see since 2016 to 2019, we have had very, very steady gains, and we are very, very proud of that. Next slide. We also took a look at the number of districts that had more than 40
Dr. Wright, did we lose you? Hold on, we'll see what happened. Angela, are you on?
I am.
Okay. I'm sending a note to Dr. Wright. If everybody could just hold while we deal with these technical difficulties, we'll get right back. Apologies all for the technical challenges. Angela, I'm wondering if
Dr. Wright is asking for a number.
okay, I will send her a number. I wonder if we can continue just with the senator and ask him to share a little bit about the legislation.
Absolutely. So Senator Tollison, you're on a bit early.
Yeah, that's fine.
If you could take a few moments and talk about how you ushered through this legislation, our Literacy-Based Promotion Act, which is our 3rd grade promotion policy that really helped move Mississippi from 39th to 2nd. And then if you could share also some lessons learned. So what might you change? What might you add? What might you not include, knowing what you know today?
Yes, okay. Well, like I said, you said in the introduction, I'd served on the Senate Education Committee since 1996 and became chair in 2012. In 2013 in Mississippi was a big year for education legislation. And one of the pieces that we're talking about today was the Literacy-Based Promotion Act. But parallel to that, we also had the Early Learning Collaboratives, which for the first time provided state funding for pre-K 4-year-old programs in Mississippi, although we did have 4-year-old programs started by local schools. So, and the great thing about this legislation is I've seen so many pieces of legislation over my years, education especially, that had good intentions. As I say, the path to student success was paved with good legislation and good intentions, but it was never implemented. And so I saw to it to make sure that it was implemented. And providentially, Dr. Wright came on the job and she made sure it was implemented. And as she was talking about earlier, the reorganization of the department and other things that made sure that the writing on the paper of the Literacy-Based Promotion Act was carried forward. And not only that, to bring in the Early Learning Collaborative and understand that this doesn't start at third grade to make sure students learn to read, but it starts obviously by birth. But when they come into our public school system, they start in the 4-year program, and we provided the kindergarten readiness assessment. But one thing that I think that we should have included in the original bill was to bring in our colleges of education and our deans of the schools of education and bring them to the table, because it is so important that they are doing the job of training teachers the science of reading. And we found out that's not necessarily the case. And we had the help of the Barksdale Reading Institute, which in several years previous, they had done some work to require 9 hours of literacy courses. And they've been very helpful. And there was people rallied around the Literacy-Based Promotion Act in Mississippi. It was a very collaborative effort. A lot of times I saw people working in silos, whether nonprofits, governments, but we were able to bring in not only the state and the State Department, but local school districts and then our colleges. And that's why it's been successful, is everybody's pulling together in the same direction. And it shows in our NAEP scores. I remember one of our biggest partners was the Foundation for Excellence in Education. And they showed a graph of where Mississippi 4th grade reading scores were on NAEP and where Florida's were in 1995. And when they implemented their Literacy-Based Promotion Act, where they were in 2002, which much higher than Mississippi. And now we're competitive with Florida. And it's, I'm all about evidence-based legislation. Proof is in the pudding. This will move the needle, but you do need that implementation. And we did get it from MDE and all the teachers and administrators across the state.
Thank you, Senator Tollison. Well, since you mentioned, we'll just, Yoli, if it's okay with you, we'll continue on with Kelly Butler's comments, and then we'll come back to Dr. Wright when she's able to get back online.
That's great. Or there was a couple of questions for the senators.
Okay.
We could also take those, but you're welcome to move it along.
Okay, a couple of questions to Senator Tollison. How did you manage the teachers union?
Okay, well, we did have some pushback. It was from our superintendents and to a certain extent, our local Mississippi Association of Educators. And there was the cry of, we're going to hold back thousands of third graders with the assessment that we do. But I think people bought into the idea of we need, one of the fundamental parts of education should be teaching children to read. The idea of they learn to read by third grade and then they read to learn everything else later. And I think we had a good job of messaging that this was important, that we were not telling them how to do it certainly, but saying that you have to do this, meet certain metrics or set the bar to a point where they should be doing it. And I think we provided support. Initially, I think we provided 7.5, 8 million, and then went up to 15 million. And to one of the most important things, and the first thing that was done with our reading panel, that Angela was on, and Kelly was on as well, is hiring qualified literacy coaches, people who knew the science of reading and how to teach reading. And those literacy coaches went into the schools of greatest need. So that was a low-hanging fruit in terms of bringing up those young people in our schools of greatest need to get them above a basic level. So I think people bought into it, and we had an overwhelming support from the legislature ultimately. And like I said, this was bundled together with the Early Learning Collaborative. And I think people were ready for change. We were hungry for education improvement in Mississippi. And I think that had a lot to do with it.
Thank you, Senator Tollison, and we'll come back to you. I know all of you are super jealous because we have a senator, or a former senator in Mississippi, who knows the science of reading. I believe Dr. Wright has been able to join us.
Yes, Kelly, I am. Sorry, I don't know what happened.
All right, we'll put your slides back up.
Okay,
Yes.
Jerry.
Glad you're back here.
Okay, go to the next slide and I'll try and pick up a little speed here. So this gives you an overall idea of between just 2 years worth of time. You can see that almost every single area, every grade level has improved. And so that just lets us know that everything that we're looking at is heading in the right direction. Next slide. And then we come to NAEPS, which I'm so proud of. This is over a 10-year period of time. You can see we've got 4th grade on your left and 8th grade on the right. And although we are incredibly proud of this, and these are significant gains, there's no doubt, we've got a lot of work to still do, and we're going to just continue to do it. Next slide. So we were absolutely #1 in the nation for 4th grade reading and 4th grade math in terms of our gains. This past year in 2019, and 3rd in the nation for our gains in 8th grade math, and 4th in the nation for our gains in 8th grade reading. And overall, when you look to the left, the 3 silver awards, if you will, this is over a 10-year period of time, and so we've done well over a longer period of time. 2nd in the nation for 8th grade math, 2nd in the nation for 4th grade math, and 2nd in the nation for 4th grade reading over a 10-year period of gains. Next slide. This slide I'm particularly proud of because I'm a firm believer that if you build it, they will come. And we had too many of our children that did not have access to advanced placement. So we put an advanced placement initiative in place. And we have nearly doubled the number of children not only participating, but also taking advanced placement classes. And the beauty of this is you will see that top number at the top of those bars. We have not dropped in overall pass rate. And normally when you add that many more people into the equation, you would expect that pass rate to drop. So this proved to me, we had way too many kids out there that were perfectly capable of taking advanced placement classes, but simply were not being given the opportunity. And if you look at the 3rd bullet, we're very proud of that. African-American students, just from in 1 year only, increased their qualifying scores by 9.5%, and Hispanic students by 6.4%. Next slide. Our graduation rate, as the governor said, is the highest it's ever been. We've increased every single subgroup as it's gone along. We also are very proud of the fact that our students with disabilities, their grad rate has gone from 27.5 to 42.2. Obviously not where we need it to be, but that's a significant gain for students with disabilities. Next slide. Likewise, our dropout rate, hats off to all of our teachers that are keeping our kids engaged in learning and keeping them in school. We've hit the lowest dropout rate we've ever had at 9.7%. Next slide. We also take a look at our grades of our districts and our schools. And as you remember, goal 6 was to have 70% or higher districts and schools graded as C or higher. And so you can see right now from 16 to 19, we've gone from 62% of our districts to 70% of our districts. And the next slide shows you the percentage of schools. We've gone from 62% of our schools rated C or higher to 74% of our schools rated C or higher. So lots of good things that are happening out in our districts. Next slide. And Quality Counts comes back in 2020 and ranks Mississippi as #2 in the nation for its improvement in education. And we have catapulted even further. We are now ranking 39th in the country compared to where we were at 44th. And we were also ranked as one of the top 5 most improved states in the nation. Next slide. So I think, did you want to pose the question, Angela, or do you just want me to keep going?
Why don't you keep going through this one and I'll start with the next section.
Okay. So everybody's been asking, you know, what has been the impact of all these school closures with Mississippi? And this has been significant. Next slide. Because what it's done is it's really lifted up the inequities that exist amongst students. There are students that were able to pivot to digital learning very quickly because they had access to the internet, and there were others that did not. We had some children that had absolutely no access to computers at home, much less adequate internet. And they have really been put at a disadvantage. And the unfortunate part of this is that it has disproportionately affected our children of color and our children in poverty. We've got about 32% of our households that do not have broadband. And we did a survey of our district saying how many of your households have a computer device, and it ranged from without a device, and it was ranged from 8%, in Oxford, where Senator Tollison is, to 44% that did not have it in the Delta in Greenwood. I love this next slide. You want to talk about dedication. This is a teacher, Mississippi teacher. She teaches at Tupelo High. She lives in Pontotoc County, and she can't get broadband or high quality phone service in her rural home. So she parks herself in this gravel lot, and she uploads videos for her students using her own hotspot. And I can tell you, this is one thing that we're going to be doing with our teachers. We are in the summer, continuing in the fall, is providing a lot of professional development around how to use this technology so that teachers can build their skills and build their capacity in order to do that. But I just thought you would appreciate that. You can't say thank you enough to teachers as far as I'm concerned. Next slide. Yeah.
So Dr. Wright, absolutely, those teachers, I think everyone has a new appreciation for the hard work teachers and educators do.
Absolutely.
If you could take just a moment to speak to the role that the department is playing to stop learning loss from getting worse, and how the school reopening process might address that.
Sure. Next slide. So one of the things that we did, next slide, is I pulled together a group of superintendents and said, okay, you're the boots on the ground. I need you to put your best thinking into everything that we need to be thinking about. As you know, I'm on the board of the Council of Chief State School Officers, and we have chiefs have calls at least twice a week. We're all sharing information. So we gave all this information to the superintendents. We also knew that they knew what was best for their districts. And so they recommended 3 different types of openings. One that's a traditional opening, which we'll talk about, a hybrid, which is a combination of having children in the school as well as virtual, and then the virtual opening. Next slide. So if you're looking at a traditional schedule, it requires everybody to be physically present. So obviously with the modifications around the CDC guidelines, et cetera, and our Department of Health guidelines, but it also, these are the parts that the superintendents put together, and they're more detailed in the overall packet, and that is posted on our website. For those of you that would like to see that, it's called Considerations for School Reopening, and that is right on the front page of our website. But it's just reminding superintendents you've got to take in mind not only daily screening and disinfectant, but also think about keeping the kids static and moving the teachers around to limit the amount of movement inside the building. And what are we doing for children and staff that cannot return due to their own health reasons, et cetera. Next slide. Then they suggested on a hybrid schedule, maybe have A-day, B-days. So you've got half the population reporting on one day and another half reporting on another day, and possibly then using Fridays either for tutorials or special population workshops for students, et cetera. Or a combination, an elementary. Obviously, we're really concerned about our little ones, particularly those that are learning to read, because it's really critical to have that kind of interaction. So there's some consideration giving to maybe bringing our little ones back and keeping our secondary students distant for a while, or then even going to an A-day, B-day schedule for both. Next slide. And then the last obviously is virtual, but that's going to depend on the districts that have the ability to pivot to that. And so we've been doing a lot of needs assessment with our districts to try and figure out, and I'll talk about that in just a second, who's got the ability to do that, who even has a learning management system in order to download high quality content onto. And so last slide. So when you look at the document that we've put together, the considerations for reopening Mississippi schools, the superintendents put it into these 6 buckets. And so all the superintendents, and now we've shared it with other states, but anybody can take a look at this and think, these are the things you need to be thinking about. And then it's got to be designed based on each individual district and their needs at the moment.
Thank you, Dr. Wright. So, I know that you mentioned kind of this equity concern that has been unmasked during this time. I know you've been working with the legislature and the governor's office. Could you talk a bit about the digital learning plan the department has developed?
Absolutely. If we could go to the next slide. If there's one thing that this really laid bare for us and for me as a leader, is that we cannot leave children behind. And we knew that the children that were struggling the most were children that were more at risk, those kids that were in poverty, those kids that did not have access to internet or even a hotspot, et cetera. And so the department, working with Barksdale Reading Institute and working with the Mississippi Alliance of Philanthropy and Nonprofits, we've been working steadily, and an outside consultant who's just been amazing. We thought, you know what, this is a moment in time for Mississippi. We have hundreds of millions of dollars coming in from the CARES Act and from the stabilization money. And we knew that this was a moment in time for not only K-12, but also for workforce development, for our community colleges, for our institutions of higher learning, because they too have children that don't have connectivity. So we requested $250 million from the CARES Stabilization Fund to support this plan. And if fully funded and implemented the way it's supposed to be, the plan would effectively create a one-to-one initiative in every single district by providing every single student with a computer device to learn at school or at home. We did a very thorough needs assessment of all of our districts, and we designed the plan based on the feedback that we got from them. So if I had a district that said, I don't need devices, but I need professional development, then that's how we built this into the plan and how we built the metrics into the plan. This is a statewide approach to mitigate the learning loss and learning moving forward. And we really pushed forward with this legislative session. Next slide. So basically what we proposed were 6 elements, not only just the devices and the services, which you think are the laptops and the tablets, but connectivity. What does that look like? Is it hotspots? Is it data plans? To be honest with you, I've even been in contact with SpaceX because they are getting ready to launch a worldwide broadband. And so we are talking with them as well as talking with our local broadband people to see what that might look like. Learning management systems. I can't say enough about this. Not all of our districts have a learning management system. And this gives us the ability to download high quality curriculum onto that learning management system and then have children download that onto their devices so that they can take it home, don't have to be connected immediately to the internet, and then can go back and then help upload it back into the learning management system for teachers. PD, can't say enough about this. I've heard it from teachers, I've heard it from leaders, and I've heard it from parents. Parents are saying we need help. And if there's one thing that this has come to fore, we need to give that help to parents. Parents want the best for their children, but we need to be able to help them with this because they were caught just as everybody was caught, a little bit off guard. Obviously about security, we know we need to make sure that our computers are secure so that children aren't going where they don't need to be. And last but not least, we put in for telehealth and teletherapy. We're hearing an awful lot about the stress and the social emotional issues that parents, teachers, children are having. So we wanted to expand telehealth and teletherapy. I'm a firm believer that if children are healthy, then they're going to learn. And I cannot tell you, now that we put that out there, the Mississippi Medical Association has stepped forward saying we are totally behind you. The Mississippi Association of Pediatrics, totally behind you. So everybody is really seeing this as a collective effort. Next slide. So here's what the legislation was that's passed. It's not exactly what we asked for, and we're going to continue to work on that. The House bill had exactly everything that we needed, but when it got to the Senate, it changed. And so instead of the $200 million that was in the House bill, they passed $130 million in a grant program to help us purchase computer devices. But instead of distributing it based on need, which is what the needs assessment allowed us to do, they changed it to average daily membership. And that membership has really nothing to do with need. So I'm going to talk to you in a minute about that. And then an additional $20 million they gave us to distribute based on need. We got another $50 million in a Broadband Availability Act to help us expand broadband into the underserved areas of the state. So here are some of the challenges that we're facing. Next slide. The majority of the funding, as I said, is based on student enrollment. Well, look what happens when you do that versus based on need. 89 districts are going to be underfunded by $45 million, and 61 districts are going to be overfunded by $35 million. So you can see that there are districts that have needs that aren't going to be met, and there's districts that are going to get money that they simply do not need. They also changed the due date for obligating the funds. In the House bill, it was at December 1st, which is a reasonable amount of time because the stabilization monies must be spent by December 31st. The Senate changed it to November the 1st, so shortening that term. Instead of us being able to push the money to the districts and then them send us their invoices, now districts have to cough up the money first. Well, if you're in a district that's got the money to do that, then that's great. But if you're in a district that's not, that may preclude you from participating. And also, obviously, we're in competition, as are all of the states, with purchasing it. So next slide. So despite all that, I'm here to tell you, we are committed to making this work. We are continuing to focus on equity in education. This is the only way to move forward with this, where this is concerned. We are going to continue to partner with our philanthropic community. They have been wonderful, wanting to know how they can help. We will continue to support districts with PD this upcoming year. And one thing I want you to focus on is that last bullet. We're talking about acceleration. We're not talking about remediation. Remediation does not work. Years and years of research has said that does not work. So we're going to take children where they are using grade level standards and accelerate their learning. We're not going to remediate the past. We're going to accelerate to move them into the future.
So, Dr. Wright, you mentioned parents earlier, and if I might, for one moment, focus on parents. So we know that right now they were forced into a situation where they're playing a critical and essential role. How can we seize this moment to always see and engage with parents and families as essential partners?
Absolutely. You cannot have successful children without engaging parents. We can do our job and they can do their job, but together we can form a very powerful partnership. There's so much research out there that shows that children with involved parents do better, regardless of income. If you've got involved parents, they're going to do better. We've got a landing page on our website called Strong Readers Equals Strong Leaders. And that has grade level appropriate activities for parents to use at home. And we're going to continue to expand that. We've got family guides for student success. We've got those pre-K through grade 8 in math and in ELA and in English and in Spanish. And those are all on our website. We've conducted family nights across the state to help parents see how they can become more engaged with their schools and with children learning. We're planning a whole stream of professional development for our parents because I think this is a way to help them build their capacity and help us in the school as well. We've launched a family engagement framework and toolkit that you can find on our website. And this is a way to engage and empower our families so that we can help all children succeed. And last but not least, we have conducted a needs assessment with every district to try and find out which families have the connectivity that they need and not. We need families in this with us hip by hip because none of us can do it by ourselves. And nobody loves their children more than a parent. I've got 2 girls and I can tell you going through school, nobody loved them more than I did. But they needed school and they needed me. And it's the same way with all parents across the state. And I think what we've got to do is to reach out, find out what they need, and then figure out a way to meet those needs so that all children can learn. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Wright. And wow, we are so very fortunate to have you in our state. And no, for all of you people out there listening to us, you may not come and take her away. We want to keep her in Mississippi. So we heard from Senator Tollison and his thinking around ushering through the legislation that really, I think, leveraged what we needed in Mississippi and definitely caused a sense of urgency in our state to ensure that kids are reading on grade level by the end of grade 3. And in his discussion, his comments, he also mentioned the Barksdale Reading Institute, So I want to turn to Kelly Butler and have her comment specifically around national funders. So as we think about national funders and maybe some of them turning their attention to the South, if we enlisted them to invest more deeply in these children and in education, what co-investments might they make so that the story of Mississippi becomes the story in more Southern states? Kelly?
Thank you, Angela, and thank you, Dr. Wright, for your summary of this hard work we've been doing. I would say that if you take anything from this webinar, it's that the stars really lined up in Mississippi. And what that means for us is that the legislature was involved, the State Department was involved, and philanthropy was involved. And Barksdale has had the fortunate position of being here from the beginning. We were formed with a generous commitment by Jim Barksdale of $100 million to the state to create the Reading Institute. And since that time, which was the same year that the National Reading Panel report was created, we really hit the ground running with the science of reading. So we have somewhat of a long view of what's been happening over these 2 decades. And when the Literacy-Based Promotion Act was proposed, many of us were concerned about retaining kids. But I think one of the things that we've learned from this experience is the focus on the adults in the equation in terms of helping them understand how to deliver good reading instruction. What it enabled us to do was to sort of shine a light on the problem, and it was a good wake-up call for us. And we linked arms, the philanthropy community and Barksdale in particular with the State Department helped to deliver and roll out the coaching model and the professional development that we've been doing. In terms of what others, philanthropy and philanthropists could do, the timing is great. We have heard from 22 states about what we're doing around teacher preparation. And one of the first things that the Institute did was to take a look at how we were training teachers in the first place. And over the last 2 decades, we have been working closely with the university teacher preparation programs to try to infuse the science of reading in the initial preparation stage. It has taken a long time, but the Literacy-Based Promotion Act enabled us to bring to the table the teacher preparation programs and to provide some training for them. The Institute, and with help from the Kellogg Foundation, provided some funding to create a similar model for the teacher preparation faculty who themselves didn't know the science of reading because their own programs, their own advanced degrees did not include the science of reading. And I think that's been one of the greatest lessons, is to create a safe space for these faculty to acknowledge that they too have some learning to do in terms of the science of reading and preparing teachers to teach effectively. The timing is good though. We are, these 22 states that we have heard from, the first state I heard from was North Carolina, and I want to give a shout out to my partners there from the Belt Foundation. They have been working with us for the last 1.5 years to connect with these 22 states, and we are now in the process of developing and organizing a multi-state initiative to bring together states who themselves are asking the question, what can we do to replicate what Mississippi has done? So if you are listening and are interested in participating in that multi-state effort, please reach out to me or put your name in the chat box. And if you are a philanthropist, we are very eager to have you become involved. We have heard from a number of philanthropists across the country, both in these 2 states and nationally, who are interested in helping us sort of shape what this initiative could be and learn from each other. There's no reason to reinvent the wheel. We have learned a lot of lessons in Mississippi. And although our legislatures and our state departments of in public instruction differ from state to state, the process is essentially the same. And in almost every state, there may be a few exceptions, it is the State Department that licenses teachers. And so they carry a big lever in terms of inserting the quality of teacher preparation that we should be seeing. And that's one of the big lessons I think we're learning here, that we could learn from each other. We need to learn from what other states are experiencing too, but I think this multi-state initiative offers a great opportunity for philanthropy to step up to the plate and participate in this change. Thank you.
Thank you, Kelly. As always, so insightful and very passionate about teacher preparation. Our final comments from Dr. Burk. So Kymyona, if you could take a moment to talk through your experience in your new role as a policy person at Excel in Ed, and you're working with those 16 states with some sort of third grade reading policy. What lessons from Mississippi are you sharing with these states, and what can these 16 states share with Mississippi?
Good afternoon, everybody. Someone decided to cut their lawn at the same time as I'm doing this, so I hope that there's not a lot of sound in the background of that. Well, you know, as we know, there have been many states, so many states, literacy leaders, or even our state chiefs who have really heard the story about what Mississippi is doing right now. And a majority of the bills that I've been able to read since I've come on board with Excel in Ed have included a lot of our key components, such as our professional development for teachers in the science of reading, administering our screeners and diagnostic assessments to understand where our students are and what their deficiencies are in reading. And also, of course, the deploying of literacy coaches, getting those boots on the ground to help support the teachers in their classrooms. So the questions that I've received are really more now about the how. How did we do those things? I first start off by saying that with our law, we not only said that we wanted this to happen, that we wanted to ensure that all of our students were reading and ready to enter fourth grade, but our legislature funded it. So we actually received funds to go along with our ask. And that was a big deal. There are a lot of states that have these type of literacy policies, but there's no funding to ensure that they're supporting. So I believe that initially we received buy-in in that way, is that we're not just going to require this of you, but we're going to send supports in the way of coaches, in the way of professional development, and those things to help you get there. Also, the question about the process that we use to employ our coaches. So there are states that are saying there's no way that we can bring on 80 people, we can hire 80 people from our state agency. And there are a lot of states that did not know about the educator in residence model that we used in Mississippi to ensure that we were allowed to take these educators, train them, provide them with all the support that they needed, the resources, and deploy them to the schools, but then they still were considered employees of their school district. So I talked to them a lot about how they can build their boots on the ground without having that type of commitment, because remember, our funds were appropriated annually. So there's no way that we can tell 80 people each year, well, we'll wait to see if you're going to have a job next year. We'll wait to see if we're going to receive the funding. So that educated residence model has become a hot topic as of late, especially as our governors look to spend their GEAR funding in promoting early literacy in their state. Also, there are several questions about our statewide professional development. How did we do that? How did we, and you know, we think about the millions of dollars we received, but 15 million compared to some states that receive 45 million, some states that receive over 50 million. I know in the South, sometimes we say that we like to, you know, we're able to do a lot with a little, but I will say that we were able to strategically, of course, under Dr. Wright's leadership, strategically look at the funding that we received and put it in the right places. And I always tell people that in Mississippi, we people and not programs. So the statewide professional development was to ensure that those teachers, those educators who were on the front lines, the educators and of course their administrators, were equipped with the knowledge that they needed in order to teach students. So we did not use the TOT or the trainer of trainers model. We worked directly with Voyager Sopris Learning to ensure that there were trained trainers and facilitators who actually flew to Mississippi to deliver each and every letters training that we have and that we continue to have with all of our teachers across the state. So we wanted to make sure that we built that capacity, and we wanted to be consistent in the message that our teachers were receiving as it relates to professional development. All right, so now what can Mississippi learn from other states? And really this has been, this transition to this role and being able to work with other states has really been enlightening. There have been some things that we've been trying to do in Mississippi that I see other states are now putting into their bills. So I'll start with somewhere where Senator Tollison left off, which is our intentional inclusion of our higher education faculty. And what I've seen a lot, specifically in the legislation that Tennessee was drafting prior to COVID-19, that they included just requirements for the teacher prep programs, and that the teacher prep educator, the professor, had to have a current valid license in teaching, and that the prep program had to include instruction in the science of reading. Also instruction as it related to dyslexia identification, and also interventions for students with dyslexia. So I know that in Mississippi, and Kelly and our reading panel, and even especially you, Angela, we have had these conversations several times about ways in which we can put it into law, that we hold our prep programs, our educated prep programs, just more accountable for ensuring that our educators are ready when they leave college to go into the classrooms on day one and to be able to provide that instruction. The next item, component that I've really seen is around high quality instructional materials. And I know that in Mississippi, we have piloted some of those things. We began with math as it was closer to the adoption year for math and not ELA. But now high quality instructional materials is finding its way into literacy legislation, because when you think of it, it's really a no-brainer. You know, we train the teachers, we ensure that they have the knowledge base, but then they also have to have those materials that don't require all of these supplements, you know, all of these other supplemental materials in order to make them effective. So including requirements that school districts must adopt high quality instructional materials, specifically those from kindergarten through third grade and aligned to the science of reading, is something that I believe we can take a look at some of those model legislations to include in our efforts. And I think that's it for me.
Thank you, Kymyona. As you can tell, this group, Senator Tollison, who will always be Senator Tollison to me, even though he is now retired, Kelly and Kymyona, you can see why I'm so thankful for these three individuals and the work that they've done in Mississippi to usher through and accomplish what we've accomplished. It truly does take all of us working together, and I think we're seeing that that work come to fruition. So I want to turn now to questions in our question box, and our Q&A box. I will pose some of these, and if Dr. Wright or our three commentators could please answer. So Kymyona, I'm going to give you the first one. I think the question is really about the students who were retained in third grade having not met the benchmark. If you could talk a bit about, because it's the statement is, I assume it was a very large percentage. If you could talk about where we were the first year and then where we landed our most recent year. And Dr. Wright, if you have something to add, please do so.
Sure. The very first year, we really had about 2 years to get this right. The law was passed in 2013, and the first cohort of students who would take this assessment would be the cohort in 2015. That year, we did have about 85% of our students to pass on the first or the initial administration. And I saw one of the questions was saying, okay, well, what do you mean after all the final retest, final numbers? So our students passed, 85% of them passed on the initial administration, and then they had 2 additional retest opportunities. And also there were students who qualified for good cause exemptions. So during our first year, by the end of our first year, we had maybe 89% or 90% of our students to pass overall. Now, before we switched over to our new level, which is level 3 or above in 2018, we had probably about 92 or 93% of our students to pass the assessment. So we had actually gotten to the point where after good cause exemptions, after retests, we probably had less than 1% of our students who were actually being retained because of the 3rd grade assessment. So that was the prime time, I believe, for us to increase the level to ensure that we were moving more towards students being proficient entering 4th grade. So I believe, Dr. Wright, you may want to take it from there.
No, I totally agree with everything you said. And the other thing that we did, we felt like our messaging was 3rd graders don't need yet another year in 3rd grade. They need something different in 3rd grade if they're being retained to address their needs. So we did design professional development for teachers, our 3rd grade teachers, and our 4th grade teachers, because the children that were being passed on with good cause exemption were still reading below grade level. So we needed to provide them the ability to how do you address the needs of children that are in 4th grade reading below grade level, as well as how do you address the needs of children that have been retained. So we really took it as an opportunity for professional development for our teachers.
And I'll just add one more thing to that too, Angela and others. I believe that we had to shift our thinking, and we had to focus more on prevention and intervention than retention. And, you know, when teachers would begin the year saying, I'm probably going to have this percentage of my students to fail. And we were like, but it's August. You know, so we have some time, we have some data, we know what to do with the science of reading. So we really know what to do to decrease that percentage of students that could potentially fail as a result of not passing the assessment. So I think shifting the thinking and the messaging around what can we do right now with what we know in order to ensure that our students are ready by the end of 3rd grade was key for us as well.
Yeah, I really want to double down on that point, because to me, focusing on retention, all it did was freak teachers out, freak parents out, and freak kids out. And I said to staff, this is a prevention piece. So let's focus on the positive. What can we do for children, for teachers, in order to make this work? Not to Kymyona's point of like how many kids are going to fail. We didn't even go in that direction. My staff never talked about that. Professional development never talked about that. It was always about meeting the needs of children.
Absolutely. And I think our policy, thanks to Senator Tollison, really points to that prevention and intervention focus as well. So this question probably would go best to Dr. Wright and Senator Tollison. Do you anticipate legislation to move us closer to universal pre-K?
Well, you're speaking to my heart now, because if you're asking me, I got in trouble. I don't know if Senator Tollison remembers this story, but I was interviewed the October before I arrived here in November, and one of the reporters said to me, if you had a magic wand, what would you do with it? And I said, without even a hesitation, I would have universal pre-K. And Lord, did I step into it, because I had no idea how many people that were out there that were just so anti-early childhood. But it has worked. I mean, that's the thing. The research is out there. The longitudinal research is out there. Our own research inside Mississippi is out there that we need to expand pre-K in a big way. I mean, we've been at it. We've been kind of picking at it and touching around the edges of it. But when you've got states, you know, even our neighboring states that are investing $85 to $150 million in pre-K, we really do need to think about that. There's so many children that need access to high quality pre-K. And I've said to people, imagine if you had every everybody in every 4-year-old in a high quality pre-K. Imagine what kindergarten teachers could do by the time they got there. And then we wouldn't even need to be worrying about a 3rd grade law, right? Because these kids would be off and running. So I'm very passionate about early childhood, about that. Senator Tollison, what do you think?
Yeah, I mean, I think it is important. And I think the model we have, which is a hybrid model in terms of the state gives money, but the locals have to put skin in the game, is a good model, good framework. It's just a matter of getting the funding to do it. And so we've had this in place for 7 years. I think we've worked out any kinks. And as Dr. Wright said, showed it's worked. I like the idea of when the wraparound services, they came in and worked with the 4-year-olds in some pilot projects to really address the needs of the young people earlier, instead of waiting until they get into elementary school or don't ever address them at all. And those students aren't able to learn to their full capacity.
You know, the legislature was really smart too in our legislation, because they put that tax credit in there. So now anybody, any business or any person, I guess, really in the state that wants to donate to their local early learning collaborative can do so and get that their taxes reduced accordingly. When we first started this, there was about, at the end of the year, maybe $200,000 or $300,000 that had been donated to the collaboratives. We're well over $3 million now each year that people are donating to their local collaboratives because they're seeing that it works.
Thank you. So I'm going to switch gears a bit. We have several questions around pre-K, and I think I hit most of those. The next question is about a statewide learning management system. Will there be a statewide, or do districts choose? And then the same around, would there be high quality instructional materials downloaded into the LMS?
So that's exactly what we're trying to do with the digital learning plan, is to ensure that everybody has got a high quality learning management system that they then can download high quality instructional materials onto. We're going to be developing a list of materials that districts can choose from. Obviously, it's going to be funding dependent, but we're going to offer a list. I call it structured choice. In other words, if you're purchasing high quality materials, here's the list you need to look at. If you're purchasing a learning management system, here's the list you need to use, because it does 2 things. Number one, it guarantees that the quality of the product, right? But it also helps us in supporting. If we said buy whatever you want, we could be supporting 50 to 60 different things, and that's just not, with the capacity level that MDE has right now, that's just not practical. And so if we can get a narrower group to do that, that would be fine. We've not looked at a single learning management system for the state. That's not to say that down the road we couldn't do that, but right now we just need to get everybody up and running with a learning management system and with high quality content.
Thank you. Let's see. There are a couple of questions about health and how health is incorporated into our schools in Mississippi. I know Senator Tollison just mentioned wraparound services. So if any of our distinguished guests would like to comment.
Did you say help or help?
Health,
Oh,
as in the health of an individual. Sorry, my Southern drawl gets in the way again.
Well, I certainly think it was part of our thinking when we put together the digital plan, the physical and mental health. We've been in conversations with the Thrive grant that we have here in Mississippi with Dr. Butler, and have been in conversations about introducing telehealth actually in the schools as a site to actually really narrow that gap between the services that we provide in schools and the services, mental and physical health needs. That, and this is a great opportunity to seize on that. So Dr. Wright, you may have more to say about that, but It's
No,
certainly,
I just have been so pleased that like I said, the Medical Association and the Pediatric Association of Mississippi have reached out to me to join calls with their executive boards so that they can figure out how they can best support this across the state. So it's really gained a lot of attention and a lot of interest with the medical field. So I think that, and you know as well as I, Kelly, we don't have enough pediatricians in Mississippi, and so we've got to figure out a way to get some access to better health care, particularly in some of the rural areas of our state that do not have adequate health care. And that was really kind of the intent of the plan.
So along that same line, as far as the digital plan, is there still room to ensure funding? Is there still room to ensure funding to ensure connectivity is based upon need versus enrollment?
Well, we're working on that, and we're in conversations with people about that, and we're hoping that we can make this work, because I just feel that this is such a moment in history, in Mississippi's history, that we have the golden opportunity to really change the trajectory of the state, not only just in education, pre-K through college, but in the workforce, et cetera. So I'm really hoping that we can work this out.
So if, as participants, if you notice there is a poll at the, or on your screen, if you would please complete that poll while you continue to listen, that would be super helpful for our campaign friends. One other question that's specific to parents, there's a lot of front matter, but I'm going to skip right into the question.
Sure.
Acknowledging that we've had great gains in education, given the impact of the COVID pandemic with school closures and learning loss, are there specific ways in which parent engagement has been most effective? And if so, will you please share?
Well, so I have a teachers advisory council, well over 200 teachers that I've met with online. And if there's one thing that I hear from them that's worked the most, is when parents are communicated with, and where I hear frustration from teachers and students, to be honest. I've got a students advisory, is communication seems to be the key. The more parents know about what's going on, the more they're able to help their children and to help the school as well. But if they're left in the dark and they don't know what's happening and they don't know what's coming, then it makes it very difficult for them to feel like they're an equal partner. So the teachers that I hear from and the students that I hear from, that is the first thing that they will say to you. I knew those that felt most positive were saying, I knew every step of the way what was going to happen. I knew what was expected of me. I knew when to turn everything in as students or as teachers. But I think parents are going to need a lot of help as we move into the fall, because I'm fearful that we are going to end up with more of a shutdown because of this virus. Our state is one of those that is ticking upward, which is not good. And as you know, the governor or the state health officer just came out and said our 5 top university hospitals, or hospitals across the state, have no more ICU beds. So we need to be thinking ahead. And that's what I've been telling the superintendents when I've been meeting with them. It's plan for the worst and hope for the best, right? But you've got to plan, and that includes parents. Parents have to know what's coming. And they, even if it's if this happens, then this may happen, or if this happens, then this may happen. Just some way of knowing what to do and what to plan for. But on our end, we're planning a lot more professional development, virtual, obviously, but for our parents and a way to get that out. I now have, this is my next goal. I don't know how to do this, but I worked on this one goal for 5 years and finally got it done. I had a goal in my mind that I was going to have a teacher listserv with every teacher in the state on the same listserv, so that I could speak directly to teachers anytime I needed to. It took me 5 years to get there, but we're there. So my goal then is, how do I do the same thing with every household across the state, right? How do I then make a listserv, if you will, of every family? And so I know my CIO is gonna love me for this, but I've been thinking a lot about it, but he's amazing. He'll figure it out. But that's something that I think is gonna be really important, because I think parents just wanna know, and then they're gonna feel like they're in a better place to help.
Thank you, Dr. Wright. the next question is really about our accountability school grading A through F system, and is in relation to Florida. But the question, I think, relates to the K2, that how do those, or do they weigh into our accountability system? And because in Florida, it doesn't necessarily, and only third grade only accounts for 1/7 of the elementary school grade. So then prioritizing and funding K2 is pretty difficult when we know that those investments are super important for K2. So how would you say Mississippi's grading system is different or compares? And Senator Tollison may want to speak to this as well.
Yeah, let me let the senator go first, because he was absolutely the leader behind our accountability model, which I have very, very strong feelings about how strong our accountability model is. So I'll say that much, and then I'm going to turn it over to Senator Tollison.
Yeah, I'm going to leave that question, specific question. I guess it's back map from the elementary school, but I'm going to leave that to Dr. Wright. But our accountability model is so important. I think it gives the public, parents, the community, schools across the state a measure of how well our schools are performing, and an easy way to identify that. It takes in a lot of factors, and hopefully that will grow over time to determine how well that school's performing. And I think it is important. I know people criticize it and say this and that, but you know, there are schools in the Delta that are C's that I think are doing a great job.
Absolutely.
Even if they're a C. And I understand, and people know that. They know good and well, because if you look at their cohort in the Delta, the others aren't doing as well. And there's some that A's, you're like, oh, I know they should be A's. And there's some that have moved up. So, I mean, I think it provides a window to the public to know what's going on in the schools, because otherwise they wouldn't know. If you're not involved in your school, you're not a teacher or spouse of a teacher or anything else, you have no idea how the schools are performing. And this gives you an objective window into that school. And I think it's helpful to the educators as well. And I do think there are some subjective things that I hope going forward that they do include in there. Attendance is one. Mm-hmm. And I think that little factors like that make a big difference. So one good thing about our third grade assessment is the MDE was able to incorporate it into the ELA exam, so you didn't have an additional test. I know that's a big complaint that people have about testing. So we had one less test. I don't remember what year that was, 2018, that they were able to incorporate that. So,
yeah,
Dr. Rogers.
Yeah, I'm sorry, Senator. I am a firm believer that accountability models drive behavior. And so when you start looking at the components inside our accountability model, those are the behaviors you want to drive. So if you're looking at the growth of all children, right? That's important. If you're looking at the proficiency rates of all children in both ELA and math, the same thing. And at our high schools, if we're looking at the acceleration component, then you get your points in the accountability model from AP exams, IB, Cambridge, dual credit, dual enrollment. So and that drives the behavior. So to be honest with you, we had some of our high schools when I first got here that weren't even offering not one AP class, not one. And so we said, okay, then if we put it in the accountability model, which we did, and we phased it in, well, now it's important because kids do need access. I showed you that table that just lets you know how many kids are out there that can qualify. And we worked with IHL, and this is another important point about, focusing and driving behaviors. We worked with all of our IHLs, and now they all agree that any child that takes an advanced placement course and gets a 3 or higher automatically gets 3 college credits and as many as 6 college credits, depending on the exam that they take. So kids deserve that. They deserve the opportunity to do as much as they can possibly do. And the accountability model drives some of those behaviors, and graduation rate's another one. That's a big component in the high school accountability model. And so if you're shining a light on something, it's not to finger point. It's to see what's working and what's not working. And when you see what's not working, that's what you got to focus on.
Thank you so much. I think that is unfortunately the end of our session, and I know Yoli would like to come back in and close us out. It has been my great privilege to serve as moderator, and I wholeheartedly thank Dr. Wright and Senator Tollison and Kelly Butler and Dr. Kymyona Burk for their presence here today, and look forward to hearing more about the great work happening in Mississippi.
Thank you.
Thank you, Angela. And let me just echo the thanks and gratitude on behalf of the campaign. Thank you, Angela, Dr. Rutherford, for serving as our moderator. Dr. Wright, we were so, and now everybody knows why we were so excited to have you as our keynote speaker for today. I'd love to thank the governor's office for joining in for a few moments. And thank you to our commentators, Senator Tollison, Dr. Burk, and Kelly Butler. We're just grateful for this conversation. You've given us so much inspiration to know what we can do for kids. So as we wrap up, I'm just going to go through very quickly our closing slides to remind you about GLR Week 2020. We've shared the links for you to be able to join any of these. It's a special link for the Friday 2 o'clock webinar sponsored by McKinsey & Company on ensuring equity as we address COVID-19 learning loss. And we have our GLR Learning Tuesdays through the rest of July. That's on the next slide. Oh, I was wrong. We'll get to the GLR Learning Tuesdays. Let me thank our GLR Week 2020 underwriting sponsors. Philanthropy steps up all the time to support our work, so we thank all of them. And the next slide would show you some of our enterprise investors. We thank them for making this webinar series, GLR Week, and all of our work possible. And then finally, you'll see the upcoming GLR Learning Tuesdays webinars. Again, the links were on the chat box. We hope you will join us and continue to learn with us. And with that, I'll say thank you to all of you. Stay healthy and be safe. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks, Yali.